5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
High and low, it's how I roll. A shooting star in a film noir. I'm floating around 10 feet on the ground. I'm floating around 10 feet on the ground. I am no average Joe. Be with me, and you will see more than you ever wanted to.
Hello, hello, hello. Happy getting close to the end of January. This is Dr. John Baranchuk bringing you Grasping Sasquatch, Stories in Science. And I want to welcome you all, as always. Uncle Bones, John Ayers, Cryptid Search, Charlotte J., the Untold Radio Network, whoever's monitoring out there today. Craig Roach, and anyone else who's showing up on other chats that I can't see right now. I appreciate your attendance. Today is going to be a little change of pace. We're going to be dealing with chapter 1 in my book, which is Yes, There is a Santa Claus, and I Believe in Sasquatch. Now, that seems a little off the overall scientific theme of my show, but we'll pull this and get this involved into philosophy and looking at the difference between faith, belief, and knowledge and or evidence. Before I do that, I'm going to ask, as always, to like and share if you like what you're hearing. As always, let's keep the conversations between yourselves in small case letters and uppercase letters for questions that you might have, so they'll catch my eye. I don't have a co-producer or co-host, so I'm got to kind of do double duty, and the words in capital letters make it much more easy for my eye to catch the questions and comments. Before we move into the show, I do want to announce, and am proud to announce, that I'm starting my second book with Hanger Publishing, which of course is Doug Hychek's publishing company. And to that end, I'm looking for stories on specific topics. I'm not going to be sharing the specific topics over the air because I do want to try and keep the specifics of my book on the down low until they're ready to publish. But if you have a story of an encounter that you'd be interested in having published in a book, I'd be more than happy to hear from you. I'm going to be asking people to email me at all lowercase John S. Baranchuk at yahoo.com. John S. Baranchuk at yahoo.com. Entitle your, if I don't recognize your name, you're going to want to title your email Sasquatch Stories. And that's the other thing I want to say is that the compensation or lack thereof for sharing your stories is, of course, the the possibility or the option of having your story in a published book by myself. And of course, your story will carry an appropriate citation, probably down right after the story, so that you get credit for that story. It will not include any financial compensation, unfortunately, but I really would appreciate everyone's help. Again, if you have a story you'd like to share in a book, email me at johnsbaranchok@yahoo.com, JOHNSBARANCHOK@yahoo.com, and I'll be happy to review it and see if it's going to fit within the format of my book. Not everybody's story will necessarily be included in the book, but I'm always also looking for stories to share on the air, because I think my regular followers are getting bored with hearing the same old story all the time, as will happen this evening, because it's illustrative of how beliefs can change. So, to that end, and on to the story. Again, this is one you've heard from me before if you've been attending from the beginning. But on one of my earlier expeditions, I had the privilege of viewing a presentation, meeting, and chatting with Scott Carpenter. May he rest in peace. And he was the first person, in addition to introducing me to the spiritual theories of Sasquatch, he was the first person to introduce me to this notion of Sasquatch being able to disappear or reappear right before your very eyes. And there are various explanations depending on your theoretical bent on how they do this, be it entering another dimension, being it camouflage, being it their primarily translucent hair blending in with the background so well that you can't see them. Flesh and blood perspective being that they're just so fast that they can do that. And kind of along the lines of the interdimensional stories, that they're able to change their molecular vibrations to that of the environment and blend in that fashion. So I came away, as I was just beginning my exploration of Bigfoot, I came away from that event interested in, even more interested in my subject, or the subject, but frankly, excuse me, frankly, quite skeptical about the possibility of, through whatever process, Bigfoot disappearing and reappearing. That would fit under what now is called the woo philosophy, and I use that philosophy with respect rather than condensation, or condensation, no, rather with condemnation. Thank you. So within weeks later, I went out and did a solo expedition. And at that point, I had a rescued pit bull mix by the name of Red. He looked like a traditional pit bull, but he was mixed with some kind of bird dog, but had that pit bull look. And we went to an area outside, well, on the Johns Mountain property here in Georgia. This is one of the first times you'll hear me share a location, because I don't require myself to have a non-disclosure agreement on my own expeditions and where I went. And I found this, what looked like an ideal site. What makes a place squatchy? What makes a place look like it would be good for a Bigfoot sighting? Well, this particular location had tall ridges on either side of a multi-site campground. And those tall ridges kind of made a draw all the way back, probably about a mile back, towards a huge, massive mountain. If from the road you were looking at this site with the ridges on the right and on the left, you'll see the mountain way in the distance. But on the left, there was a stream running right at the base of the ridge that fed into a larger, what I would call a stream, but I think in that area it was called a river. It dumped out into a river. So I've got a little trailer, one of those mini trailers that I camp in when I'm going out Bigfooting. So we set up the trailer as close to the ridge on the left as you could be when looking from the road into this site. Got the trailer set up, got a campfire going. Well, got the trailer set up. Walked back towards the mountain probably about half a mile. Didn't get all the way back to the mountain. Just looking for Bigfoot tracks, especially around the stream with the mud and sediment that comes on the edges of streams and rivers being prime territory for looking for footprints. We didn't find any, and I was kind of disappointed because I thought this place really looked squatchy. The reason we like the ridges on either side, or at least on one side, is that having the ridges above you and your campground close to or at the base of the ridges gives the Sasquatch the high ground. Them being an apex predator, it's better for them to be able to view you from above, and that's a better vantage point for attack, if you will, and figuring out how to sneak on into your camp. I don't necessarily subscribe to the notion that Bigfoots are these dangerous human killing machines whatsoever. I do think, like any other race, and I'm not saying I think they're people necessarily, but any other animal, you got animals that are going to be more aggressive than others, and others that are more shy or timid. So I generally subscribe to the theory that if you don't provoke these creatures, however you want to classify them, that they will present a danger to you. Now, I have heard down in Texas, they've got some real aggressive Sasquatches that you really need to be careful of. And I've also heard that in Alaska, the Sasquatches can be particularly aggressive and will approach you even if you have a firearm in your hand, be it a rifle or a handgun. And recently watched a legitimate documentary of Alaskan Bigfoot where a Bigfoot was advancing on somebody, and he put 330-06 rounds into the creature's chest, to the point that he was close enough that he could hear the rounds, of the rounds hitting this Bigfoot's chest, and it stopped the Bigfoot from advancing. The Bigfoot gave him kind of a grumpy stare and turned around and retreated into the woods. But those are whole other sets of topics and discussions for another time. At any rate, I tied my dog Red up with a long, long rope to a tree and got the campfire going. Had dinner, and right around dusk, while there still was some decent light you could see with the naked eye, Red got up from laying down, and he walked forward right towards the road, but nowhere near close to the road. But he advanced a few steps, and he put his snout at a 90-degree angle up into the sky. And he sat there on his hind legs, probably for about 3 to 5 minutes, just sniffing and sniffing and sniffing the air. And when he finally brought his head down, he went into an aggressive fit of barking and growling and kind of false lunging at something that looked like he was looking at something right in front of us. I didn't see a thing, but Red was sensing something, be it a sight or a smell. And again, based on where he was looking and his behavior, I expected this to be very close to us, but I couldn't see a thing. And he went on and on and on. And I finally got up out of the chair and calmed him down, went and got my headlight, the headlights that you put on your head. I use red headlights. The reason I use red headlights is if you use a white light and you turn it on and your eyes adapt to that, when you turn that light off, it takes your eyes 30 minutes to fully adapt to the dark again. Whereas if you use a red or green light, it takes you 0 minutes for your eyes to adapt to the dark. So you immediately have night vision. Whereas if you use a white light, you've got a good 30 minutes. Now, a lot of your night vision comes back, within the first 10 to 15 minutes, but you don't have your clear night vision for 30 minutes after you've been exposed to white light. So put my headlight on, and I put Red on his leash, and Red being a pit bull mix, I expected him to be at the ready to get after whatever was provoking him. And as I began to walk forward, he wouldn't get off his haunches. He did not want to move forward at all. So I put him back on this long rope, and I'll be darned, as I started walking towards the path leading out towards the road, he went and he crawled under my trailer, got down on all fours and scooted under the trailer and hid under the trailer as I began to walk forward. And so this was, about 3-4 weeks after I heard Scott Carpenter's presentation on disappearing and reappearing Bigfoots and the Nephilim, however you want to pronounce it. And as I was walking forward, by this time it had gotten darker. And although I didn't believe it when this incident started, by this point, the way Red was acting as if he was barking at something directly in front of him, honest to goodness, it began to make a believer out of me. And as I was walking forward, I actually began to put my hands out in front of me a little bit for fear that I might walk into a Bigfoot that I simply couldn't see. But that didn't happen. I made it out to the road. I walked down the road one way, came back to the camp entrance, walked down the road another way. Couldn't see a thing. No sign of any creatures. So I came back to my campfire, pulled poor Red out from underneath the trailer, and he was sitting there next to me, beside me at the campfire. And we sat there for about 3 to 5 minutes. And about 2-3 minutes into that, I begin to hear, I'm facing the road, and I begin to hear brush rustling to the right of me at about 25 yards away from me. Just the brush rustling, but it was a pretty loud rustle. Red, upon hearing that rustle, got up, walked around, and faced those bushes. And this time when he stuck his nose up, he didn't stay up for like 3 to 5 minutes this time. He lifted his nose to the sky, and in a matter of seconds brought his nose down and again went into a fit of anger and rage that I had never seen in him before. Growling, snarling, barking, kind of fake lunges forward, and it was a loud commotion for me. I had never seen him act like this before. And he's going on and on and on, and it getting louder and louder and louder. And just above his own growling and snarling and barking, I heard a well, that was enough for me. I got up out of my chair. It was a butt puckering experience for me, if you get my drift. I got up out of my chair and went to my truck, and I carry a 45 Smith & Wesson MP with me. And I went and got that thing, and I have never before or never since on any expedition chambered around. But after that roar, or that growl, if you will, that close to me, I grabbed that gun out of my glove compartment, pulled it out of its holster, and with these semi-automatics, you don't pull the trigger back, you push the slide back to chamber around, and it doesn't make a sound as loud as chambering a shotgun shell, but it still makes an audible noise when you chamber that first round. And the second that I chambered that first round, that growling, because the what I think was a Bigfoot growling at me continued to growl, and Red continued to bark, still on that rope, thankfully. And that was ongoing as I was walking from the campfire to my truck, about 20 feet. And the second I chambered that round, that growling stopped. The rustling of the bushes stopped. And then Red ran back around the campfire the way he came and crawled under the trailer again. So I pulled him out from the trailer, settled him down beside me, and we sat there in silence for about another 15 minutes. And when nothing else happened, both Red and I were ready for the security, or the thought of security, in my little mini camper. We crawled into the camper, locked the doors, and slept as best we could that night. And so that was probably either the most or second most harrowing encounter that I have ever had on any kind of Bigfoot expedition. Probably made worse by the fact that I was by myself with just my dog. I think having another person might have led to more confidence or feelings of invincibility. But wow, the hairs on my arms are standing up as I'm telling you this story. So, the point of that story and our topic today is I went into that encounter not believing in Bigfoot's appearing or disappearing in front of you. And indeed, I didn't see a Bigfoot appear or disappear in front of me. But the way my dog was barking and looking, not in the distance, but directly at something that seemed to be right in front of us, I believed it enough so that when I was walking towards the road again, I was holding my hand out, hoping to, not bump into a possible Bigfoot with my entire body. If I felt a body in front of me, I don't know what I would have done. And so that leads to the presentation today of yes, there is a Santa Claus, and I believe in Sasquatches. These are my biases. And that event was what really opened my mind to the possibility of woo experiences, and why in my field research I remain open to those and have thought of some experimental designs to try and figure some woo phenomena out. Now, as many of you know, if you're brave enough or stupid enough to share your Bigfoot interest with some friends, you get a variety of responses. You get believers, you get skeptics, and then the most infuriating response that I encounter is the pompously overconfident ass who, in response to my declaration that I believe in Bigfoot, retorts, "Yeah, and I used to believe in Santa Claus when I was 4-year-old too." And they kind of chuckle and laugh at you. If you're that person, I'm torn between begging you to leave this show versus insisting on you listen to this show using an open-minded attitude, the most open-minded attitude you can extract from your soul, which is most certainly burning in the depths of hell. Yes, to an emotionally hardened and calloused adult, a belief in Santa Claus may seem silly or childish, like a lie we tell children. Nonetheless, the Christian church supports the concept of Santa Claus, and in some churches includes a Santa Claus image. Most churches I've been to include a Christmas tree, which, if you look back on spiritual history, is actually a pagan symbol. Not pagan as in devils, but pagan as in nature worshippers. Madison Avenue continues to support Santa Claus for sales and profits. To even the indifferent working class Joe, St. Nick represents either a day or two off from work, sometimes with pay, sometimes without pay, or an opportunity for overtime. But to continue to believe in Santa Claus's existence, come on, you're an adult. I nonetheless believe in Santa Claus for more than one reason. First, secular history reveals there actually was a physically endowed St. Nicholas. He was born circa 280 in Patara, Lycia, in the area that is part of present-day Turkey. He lost both of his parents as a young man and reportedly used the entirety of his inheritance to help the sick and the poor. A devout Christian, he later served as the bishop of Myra, a city now called Demarais. For better or worse, profit and greed, or happiness and time off, the Christian's church and Madison Avenue have undeniably propagated St. Nicholas and St. Nicholas's life and character during the Christmas season. Secondly, the second reason I believe in Santa Claus is you only need to open your heart long enough to look into the awe, wonder, and amazement of a child's eyes seated in Santa's lap. I'm kind of getting choked up. I'm sorry. As I remember my daughter, seeing that in my daughter's eyes, who I'm still in touch with, and we have a good relationship. As corny and sentimental as it may seem, do it or remember when you have done it, and Santa Claus' existence will become undeniable to you. So Santa at one time was a crepuscular being whose spirit lives on in a variety of professions, the eyes of children, and the spirit of giving during the holiday seasons or at other times. Yes, I do believe in Santa Claus. I also believe in Bigfoot. And although this is not a full recitation of the Bigfoot literature, I've tried to pick some key stuff out that I feel is relevant. Mary Green and Janice Carter in 2002 written and published 50 Years with Bigfoot, the Tennessee Chronicles of Coexistence, a remarkably detailed account of a Tennessee's family's relationship with a Bigfoot clan. It includes detailed descriptions of Bigfoot appearances, behavior, and close relationships, friendships with that family. If you can get your hands on a copy of that book, snatch it up, whatever price you got to pay. If you can't get your hands on a copy of that book, on YouTube, there are two shows or two podcasts that you can listen to that book being read. One of them you got to pay to listen, the other you don't. And I strongly encourage you to listen to that book. It's about somewhere between 11 and 14 chapters. And it's incredible. Incredible details of the Bigfoot's anatomy, incredible stories of Janice's interactions with Fox, the Bigfoot that her grandfather found pinned under a tree after a storm, and they brought back to their house and they raised as a child until he started eating all the food out of the house, and then moved into the barn until he started eating the goats and attacking some cattle, and then shoot off into the woods, was gone for about a year, and came back with his own family, and they continued that relationship. Jeff Meldrum's excellent book, Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science. It's published in 2006, and this is from pages 73 to 88. Nicely reviews and summarizes Bigfoot's existence in the Native American culture through their oral tradition, totems, and other concrete symbols, masked stone foot carvings, tracings, just to name a few, as well as scientific research and evidence of the animal. You're going to have to excuse me a second while I reach for some water. Thank you. Nick Redfern's book, The Bigfoot, the Encyclopedia of Sasquatch, Yeti, and Cryptid Primates, also highlights Bigfoot occurrences in other locations and cultures under the same or similar names. He also documents other creatures sometimes resembling Bigfoot, like Yeti, and others bearing no resemblance to Bigfoot whatsoever, aliens interacting with Bigfoot. I lost that thought. Oh, I just got it again. Scott Carpenter. Well, let's see if I mention him. Stan Gordon's book, The Silent Invasion, dated 2010, documents extensive sightings of Bigfoot and UFOs. There it is. Scott Carpenter's book, The Nephilim Among Us, updated in 2019, highlights Christian and Jewish texts referring to creatures potentially Bigfoot related and advanced his hypothesis that Bigfoots represent one of a variety of Nephilim. And if you don't know what the Nephilim are, or Nephilim, I'm not sure how to correctly pronounce it. When God cast out the fallen angels out of heaven, including Lucifer, they promised to corrupt humanity by coming down to the earth and having sex with humans. One thing I've never been able to reconcile about that story is that, as I had always understood it, angels were gender neutral, neither male or female. So I don't know if they developed genitals when they came to Earth or how they impregnated humans, but somehow that had to happen to create the Nephilim. There have also been thousands of credible and professionally vetted sightings that cannot be dismissed as hoaxes. And so, of course, those continue. Much more concrete evidence, incorrectly characterized, pun intended, of their existence can be found in authenticated casts of Bigfoot prints, with the original ones being made from plaster of Paris, or more recently, Bakelite is a friendlier substance to use. Dr. Meldrum in 2006 once again draws kudos for this topic and is generally considered to and recognized to have the largest collection of casts of Bigfoot prints, and is known as the foremost expert in debunking hoaxed and misidentified prints and authenticating genuine Bigfoot prints and casts. Part of what gave him the good fortune to have the largest correct collection is when Dr. Grover Krantz passed on, or maybe even before he passed on, he contributed his collection to Dr. Meldrum. Finally, the ongoing controversy of the Patterson-Gimlin film has been deemed a hoax, but later repeatedly authenticated, and currently stands as the gold standard of video evidence of Bigfoot. If you follow on the internet, there's currently some controversy going on about different interpretations of copies of that film, and a respected researcher, M.K. Davis, reinterpreting and finding new things in those films. I would encourage you to go back to, I'm not sure what episode it was, the episode on evidence, maybe episode 8 or 9, where I discuss black box phenomena, because when you start running through video or photography through a digitalized piece of equipment, you really don't understand how that piece of equipment is altering that image. When I remember distinctly, somebody made a good point when I presented that on that show. They said you could literally create your own Bigfoot by altering the pixels in those images and change them and modify them to the point that it looks like a Bigfoot. And I think that's true. You can end up creating your own Bigfoot by simply running them through some computer equipment. Of course, besides the Patterson-Gimlin film, we have the Freeman footage, and more recently, if you just search almost any search engine on best video evidence of Bigfoot, you'll find a variety of videos that are left to the observer to vet and authenticate. I'd also like to cite Doug Hycheck here because he has, and I want to get permission to use this on a show. He has a just paper and pencil checklist of criteria you can use to personally vet video. And if they meet so many of these criteria, I think the cutoff for a legitimate video is somewhere between 5 and 7. This just came to my head now. I really wasn't prepared to discuss it. But he says he has good validity and reliability using that checklist. And he did use it on one of his earlier shows. And again, it's my hope to get permission. And maybe one show we'll just watch videos and utilize that checklist and test that system out. These videos, many of these videos are nonetheless astonishing and in some cases convincing. Nonetheless, if you remain a closed-minded skeptic after understanding the trials and tribulations of the Patterson-Gimlin film and viewing it, these later examples will be a waste of your time. My point here is I believe in Bigfoot because there's substantial evidence consistent with its existence, some of which I have personally witnessed and experienced on BFRO expeditions. Indeed, although he asserts that the question of belief is simply not at issue, it connotes acceptance of something that is true in the absence of objective evidence or conclusive proof. We're talking belief here. Even a hardcore scientific proponent like Dr. Meldrum has commented that a respectable proportion of the evidence suggests the existence of an unrecognized ape known as Sasquatch. I think since I've written my book, he has revised that and now has come out and said that he does believe that Sasquatch exists. Later he adds, for me, it now seems more incredible to suggest this matter could be dismissed as mere stories, misidentifications, and spurious hoaxes than it is to at least rationally entertain the well-founded suggestion that the legend of Sasquatch possibly has its basis in a real animal and may eventually prove to be among the most outstanding zoological discoveries ever. And that quote is taken at a time before he came down on actually believing in Sasquatch. If you hear some snoring, that's Hoss sitting in the chair beside me. He's asleep. In another discussion on the topic, and I would like to thank Dr. Meldrum for taking the time to interact with me on this. This is from a personal communication from him, July 14th, 2020. He wrote, the sheer number of credible witnesses reporting remarkably consistent observations strongly indicates there's something out there unacknowledged. I think those statements contain many qualifiers to go to great lengths to avoid saying I believe in Bigfoot after writing 276-page text on the subject. But as I said, he's now come around. I believe you would be quick to point out, however, that there is a big difference between saying one believes in the existence of Bigfoot and personally or professionally knowing it exists and or proving it scientifically that it exists. I personally will never claim to know Bigfoot unless I see one fairly up close and personal, and can unequivocally determine that it's not a man in a suit. I state this despite my unequivocal belief and certainty of the experiences of many investigators in the Georgia-Tennessee BFRO that have had such encounters, and in the face of mounting observational and phenomenological evidence. Although debated, I continue to believe we need to rise to this scientific level in order for the government and government agencies and organizations to take steps to protect the species and their habitat. Currently, an internet search, again, my book's been published 3 years at this point. An internet search reveals Skamania County, Washington, passed a law in 1969 deeming the slaying of Bigfoot to be a felony and punishable by 5 years in prison. The law was later amended, designating Bigfoot as an endangered species. 1969, that's amazing, that laws began to be enacted against taking a live Bigfoot. Endangered species, I think we could debate about that. I think people genuinely want them declared an endangered species because they're so rarely seen. The flip side is, if you believe in evolution, flesh and blood, the occurrence of these things is hypothesized to date back to the time when the continents weren't divided up. And I think it was called the Pangea Bridge, where people could, in effect, walk across the ocean on land from one continent to another before the continents, through continental drift, further split up. California keeps a record of non-game animals in the California Code of Regulations. If any animal is missing from that list, as is the case with Bigfoot, that means it can't be hunted legally. Interesting. Oregon follows a similar policy to California in that any animal not classified under Oregon's wildlife laws is considered prohibited to hunt. Like the rest of the Pacific Northwest, Oregon has a long history of alleged Sasquatch encounters. We receive periodic reports of Bigfoot sightings, says Michelle Dennehy, Wildlife Communications Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. It would appear that scientific proof, however, is needed before the broader scientific and zoological communities accept its existence and listed on the National Register of Endangered Species. Again, I'm not sure whether they're endangered or not. Such a designation is reportedly necessary to receive federal funding to protect the species and its habitat. And there you go. Whether it's an endangered species or not, I do believe that human beings continue to increasingly encroach upon their habitat, and eventually their habitat will be significantly reduced. Producing such evidence will not be easy. Despite multiple books touting the scientific evidence of Bigfoot, the bulk of evidence contained therein is phenomenological in its nature. Analogical, anecdotal, demonstrative, digital, forensic, physical testimony. And again, I did a show on evidence. I would refer you back to that show. The analogical, anecdotal, demonstrative evidence are some of the weakest forms of scientific evidence, and digital or forensic or physical or testimonial evidence also have their particular weaknesses. Such evidence is apparently insufficient for the broader scientific communities in power that be. As such, it may be that experimental evidence will be required given the rarity of confirmed sightings of the beast relative to those looking and researching. As such, experimentation will indeed be a formidable and drawn out process. A broader acceptance of Bigfoot is both plagued by and enhanced by the challenge of reconciling phenomena of Bigfoot and the science of Bigfoot. This may be an outgrowth of the individuals involved in the process and/or the economic reality of life. Using my example, I originally joined BFR expedition because I needed to see Bigfoot up close and personally to know that they exist rather than to simply believe that they do. In short, I was seeking a phenomenological Bigfoot experience, nothing else. This desire grew out of my initial guilty pleasure of watching a TV show entitled Mountain Monsters. Now, I don't know how many of you folks have seen this show, but I just loved that show because they'd always talk about their plans to explore the woods, set up their traps, gonna catch Bigfoot, and Trapper, I don't know if Trapper was the leader or not. They'd rally before they would rally before they went out in the woods, and yeah, let's go get him. We're gonna get him this time. We're gonna get that Bigfoot. And then when they got into the woods and they got pretty minor signs of Bigfoot, sounds of Bigfoot, they just ran like hell with those shotguns at their side once the action got started. This led me to another TV show, Finding Bigfoot, that appeared less hysterical in production approach and contact, as well as belly laughs, and introduced me to the BFRO through Matt Moneymaker's participation in that show. Participating in a BFRO expedition therefore seemed an ideal step to achieve my phenomenological aspirations. I think most of you know what phenomenological means, but what it boils down to is we're looking at and trying to find the phenomena of Bigfoot. Seeing a Bigfoot would be great, but you're more likely to experience some of the phenomena, the footprints, debatable tree knocks. The sound isn't debatable, but how they make it is debatable. Through these, I came to believe in Bigfoot. A final comment is about believing in Bigfoot revolves around the concept of faith. Faith is defined as complete trust or confidence in someone or something, or a strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than spiritual proof. And apprehension not as an anxiety, but in as understanding and believing in Bigfoot. To believe it, or in God, excuse me. To believe in Bigfoot requires a leap in faith as well at this point. As such, that belief represents a significant theological dilemma. As a Christian, and I'm not a Bible-thumping Christian, but I do believe in God. Not only do I believe in God, but I know God exists. Ironically, some of the biggest skeptics regarding Bigfoot's existence would unhesitantly agree and accept my knowledge of God, yet they deny any belief or knowledge in Bigfoot. Think about that. You know God exists, but refuse to believe that Bigfoot exists. Both require a leap of faith. You can believe in God and can cite a variety of phenomenological evidence to support that belief. And despite there being a large body of phenomenological evidence supporting Bigfoot, many God-fearing Christians would scoff at the idea. It's not my intention to be blasphemous here. It is my intention to point out that both beliefs require a similar leap in faith process. Many are willing to take one and not the other. Yes, I believe in Bigfoot, and my book and podcast are put forth acknowledging this bias in that belief. Indeed, it assumes that Bigfoot does exist without debating its origins, but remains scientifically unproven to the degree necessary for a wider adoption of its existence by the scientific community. It is my sincere hopes that my efforts to better educate the novice and dedicated field researcher to inspire them on using better scientific reasoning and logic and experimentation in their field research. We got a minute at the most for questions or comments. If you have my book, you could probably have just read along with that in chapter 1. That I skipped around a little bit, but that was taken directly from chapter 1. Okay, well, in consideration for the next Untold Radio show coming up, I'm going to call it a night. I'd like you, as always, to keep your mind open, your boots on the ground, and your heart with your higher power. Good night. I appreciate y'all. Bye-bye.
I see you running out of reason. Don't try to blame it on the seasons. Why you wanna walk away? When we began, swear we had something that would last. Baby, has the feeling passed? Falling in was easy. How do I make it stay? I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Oh, I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Was I a fool? I know sometimes I may wonder, but I would never leave asunder a thing as good as what we have. Is it a rule? What's good is worth the fighting. There ain't no denying that you and I were made to last. Falling in was easy. How can we make it stay? I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Can we go back to the start? I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Tried and true.
Wanna do it all with you by my side. If you're in, meet me